Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. Today, I am going to be joined by Eldred. He is a client executive for systems engineering at Vargo, and Vargo is a solutions provider. They also have a system of their own that we're going to talk about today, but they provide solutions for fulfillment services, e-commerce, distribution, some manufacturing things as well. You may remember them. We talked to them last year at ProMat. Caught up with them a little bit to hear about what they're doing and also find out a little bit about Vargo. So we're going to talk to Art today. He's going to talk to us about their system COFE, which is a West system, and then we're going to talk about the differences between WES, WMS, WCS. Talk a little bit about the idea of waveless because it is a waveless system. So Art, welcome to the show. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having us, Kevin. It's always a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Definitely. Happy to have you on as well. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, maybe for some newer listeners that didn't hear the ProMat episode, tell us a little bit about Vargo and what it is that you guys do.
Sure, it'd be great. So Vargo is what we refer to ourselves in the industry as a systems integrator. What I mean by that is we do not actually manufacture any components. Mm-hmm. Our point or our value proposition to our clients is to design and build the best processes and methodologies, and then systems being the hardware that goes with that for fulfillment, the fulfillment industry. And by being a systems integrator, what we do is we represent a large line of material handling suppliers and equipment providers. And our view is to be agnostic when we pull the right technologies and the right solutions to fruition with our clients and or meet their needs. So at the end of the day, we have a very strong bench of engineers and project managers and folks that do execution and design work. Mm-hmm. And we rely on our partners to bring the equipment to us. And we're the ones who kind of bring the solutions to life by choosing the best of breed, but most importantly, the best to match the fit of our clients. And while we have a large breadth of partners, mm-hmm. we also have some in-house proprietary software, which we'll be talking about here in a little while, that gives us some very unique advantages to the industry.
Definitely. And I think, one of the things too, I guess just to point out for people that are looking to do some upgrades in automation and different solutions and things of that nature. I mean, you guys you mentioned you're an integrator, and I think working with an integrator is a better option than just going with like one solution manufacturer, right? Because you get, like you said, best of breed, kind of a mix, and you get the fit that's right for you. You're not kind of stuck on one thing. Right.
Yeah, and I think that lies the part of the advantages that integrators are starting to come back into the industry or back into the strong value to organizations. And was we have explosions of technologies and new product offerings, which I'd say in the last 5 years our industry is absolutely seeing that. Yeah. We solve a lot of different opportunities with that. One, we're bringing those new technologies to the marketplace and representing them, and not giving you just a suite of products. We're giving you the best fit and the best match for your needs. But the other thing we're doing is we're kind of crossing the technologist with the applied side in distribution and warehousing and fulfillment. What I mean by that is there's a lot of robotic companies that are entering the marketplace, and a lot of the AI intelligence behind those. And what those companies bring to the marketplace has some very strong value and some strong benefits. But what they don't have is the applied experience and knowledge to apply it to fulfillment. For example, I might take an articulating arm robot, but the robot, doesn't know what type of product it's going to be handling, or what the functions are, or how it fulfills orders going into cartons, and what those cartons may look like, or what the requirements are. So we have brought a really strong value proposition to folks in that space, and we've been pretty highly successful too. So I can think of one recently that we've done with Kindred, a robotic matching or order fulfillment system that gathers items into a bin and then puts it into its cubby location, where we have really kind of made the robot as dumb as we can. The AI that drives it is extremely intelligent, right? And then we have really made that flow from start to finish. So one of the things that we pride ourselves on is we're not implementing solutions that really fix a silo of an opportunity. We're looking at an end-to-end flow. So it's got to provide value into the entire flow of the organization or fulfillment operation, not just one little entity, which is the kind of the age-old things. As we get into black belts and green belts and Six Sigma, we've been great at implementing those, and at the detriment of whatever was up chain or down chain from the operation that we've done. Yeah,
I think you have two really good points there. The first, being about these robotics companies and the technology, like you said, over the past 5 years, it's just advanced so much in our industry. It's crazy. But
it's exciting.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting. It's really cool, actually. I love it. But, I think that you had a good point there where, there's robotics companies are like coming on the scene basically. And I talked to a lot of robotics companies through the podcast as well. And a lot of times what I'm seeing and learning is that their origins are not really from fulfillment and distribution. Like a lot of times the founders and the people that have created these solutions they don't have that background. So it's a really good point there that you make, that they're coming up with these great technologies, but an integrator like yourself, like Vargo, can really take the technology and then apply it in the way so that it is like a fit into this full flow that you're talking about, end to end, which I think is really the key. Because if you're looking at, let's just automate this one process in the middle of all of our processes, it's going to help a little bit, but then at the end, like you said, there's going to be stuff like downstream or upstream that it may affect that you didn't even think about. So it's good that you guys bring that experience to the table for people that are looking to get into some type of automation like that.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of opportunity just with, what product should you be sending to the robotic centers? How does a robot interface in with a conveyor system? The roboticists are really great at picking and placing, but when they put it onto a conveyor or pull it from a conveyor, they're like, well, why is the conveyor moving now? And it shouldn't be moving. I really wanted to get it fixed, or I wanted it positioned 3 inches down chain a little further. And why can't we get to that? I mean, those are the things that we're really kind of bringing to the table, is the full solution development, not just the element of somebody taking intervention from a lab and putting it into the field. And that lies the problem, right? I've got an awful lot of intervention and ingenuity that is hitting this marketplace. It's just a pace that is something we've not seen. But when it comes to applying it to how do I use this in a fulfillment operation, there's a lot of scratching of heads going on, and you're training operators, and you're training the software folks, and you're training to the person that is doing the maintenance, and all of that's got to be brought to life. Definitely.
I think it's important to try and figure out how it all works together. And so it's good that you guys are able to bring that experience and be able to see the full picture. So, One thing too, I guess, when we talk about all this technology, and all these different integrations, there has to be something that allows for all of this to work together from a system standpoint, right? So you guys provide this system called COFE, right? COFE, COFE.
Yep.
What does COFE stand for?
Great question. Yeah, it stands for Continuous Order Fulfillment Engine, and the whole premise of it is to have a continuous flow of work to your resources, being both people and machines.
Okay. All right. So a good name. I like the short version, COFE.
I do too.
So tell us a little bit. So it's a warehouse execution system. So tell us a little bit about how it works, and then you guys also mention on the site that it's the most advanced warehouse execution system. So tell us a little bit about how it works, and then why is it one of the most advanced?
Sure. So I'll back up even to the origin of a WES. So
sure.
The term warehouse execution system was really birthed out of something called an MES, which is really manufacturing execution system.
Okay. And,
if you kind of think of the production lines of, let's say you're making automobiles or cars or widget A, widget B, and you're gathering a ton of components and you're bringing it to a point, and then you're performing an operation and then producing a product. The goal of those type of operations or MES is to make sure that you don't have a ton of work in progress and the product that you have is matching to what you're producing. So, we used to have, years ago, we would have environments where, let's say I was making a car, I would produce 1,000 red bumpers, and I would bring all 1,000 red bumpers up to the production line, and then I would produce all my red cars. Mm-hmm. Well, we've gotten much more dynamic and more demand-based in what we're building and when we're building it. So now I'm having a red bumper by a white bumper, by a blue bumper, by a black bumper, back to a red bumper. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to sequence each one of those components to match the demand of what's being produced. So when we looked at that operation, and there's a great book by the gentleman, Toyota, he wrote it up a couple of years ago about manufacturing execution systems. We have really applied that to warehousing. So we think of e-fulfillment in particular as producing the same thing. We're producing widgets. That widget happens to be a customer order, but it's many different components. And every widget looks a little different from the widget before or the widget after. So gathering all those components to get into a box or a bag that's being shipped to an e-customer sounds very much like a manufacturing execution system. And we're doing the same type of principles and borrowing the same type of methodologies on how we bring product to a production line and send it out, in this case, a shipping order to a client. And so the warehouse execution system is really, just as it says, it's meant to execute tasks inside the fulfillment operations and manage workflow and nothing else. Okay. So we still have the concept of a WMS and a WCS. Warehouse management system, WMS, manages the things that we would refer to as the single record of inventory, your customer business rules, and even the statuses of the work that's being completed. So it's managing the entire warehouse. The warehouse control system, WCS, would manage anything that's more at the machine level. Okay. And what we saw prior to kind of Vargo being engaged with WCS is that WCS has kept growing and growing in their functionality and their presence and their geography within the technology stacks. What I mean by that is orders and information about people and resources kept kind of growing into the WCS to be successful. So a typical example might be a loop sorter that has a WCS, but it was managing the waves of the work that was being done. It was doing the allocations of the order to the chutes, and it was monitoring the progress of all of that. With the introduction of a warehouse execution system, we're now managing that flow all the way back to the time of the receipt of the inventory, when it was picked, and we're dynamically making decisions all along the way down to the final destination being a chute and when we're assigning to the chute. And the WCS now is just purely machine controlled, meaning here's a scan, give me a directive, and I will execute that directive on my machine. So this kind of complicated landscape that we had before of a WMS and a WCS, while we've added another subsystem called a WES into that, being COFE for us, we've actually simplified the task and roles of each one of those technology stacks and made life a lot easier for our folks. The one thing that I would say that, as we say, we're the leader in the pack, and I truly believe that, is we've been around the longest time. So this is not something that was invented in 10 years or 15. Our WES premise has been around well over 20 years and is extremely mature in what it's doing. There are others I will say, that come into the marketplace with the WS, and maybe they don't understand the role or the purpose, and they say it's a lot more than it is or a lot less. But again, if we go by the WMS has its 3 functions and the WCS as is, we're very black and white with what a WES does, which makes us a really good choice for our clients.
Interesting. So it's almost like I guess I'm thinking here like an analogy to this. I mean, the WES is almost like the conductor in the orchestra, right? So it's getting everything kind of communicating together and then flowing all the way through, and making sure, I guess, everything's hitting the perfect note, I guess, to say.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. And so, you said it's been around for 20 years, so I'm imagining it's maybe, one of the first ones out there. So, how did, I guess, the initial idea to create the WS come about, and what was the thinking is from Vargo's standpoint of like, okay, that's what we should create is a WS.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, it's funny. We our very first system started with our software company that Vargo actually purchased quite a while back, but it started in 76, in a military type operation with AGVs, and it was more like a parts depot. And those parts needed to go out in a continuous flow business or basis. So there was really no one at that time that linked AGVs with picking and packing orders that were going out to fulfill the military's requirements. And some of those things needed to happen, immediately. If I had a very, very high need in the field and a part needed to get to the field, you couldn't wait for the massive work to be done in front of it to get that product out the door. Maybe it was a spark plug for a tank that was down in the field. You wanted, if you got a hot order, you wanted to get that spark plug picked, packed, and out to the field as fast as you can.
Right.
So the idea of this continuous order fulfillment premise started way back then, and has really kind of grown and evolved into something that was, let's say, customized for a very specific need in the military at the time, to something that's now a product and commercially available to the fulfillment industry.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, actually, because supply chain in general and logistics, really gets its roots from the military. So it's interesting that you guys also started from there. Yeah. So that's cool. So now COFE itself, the WS it's a waveless system, right? And you keep mentioning continuous flow, and I think the wavelessness, I guess, is what allows it to be a continuous flow. So talk to us a little bit about the difference between a system where people may be familiar with waves, right, where things are coming in batches,
right,
versus this waveless system, and what's the benefit of it?
Yeah, so we really have 2 different deployment models within our WS. One is I'm going to call more continuous order fulfillment, like the acronym, and then within that we also have this waveless model. Continuous order fulfillment, really, and everything we do is what we refer to as pull-based or demand signal-based, meaning there's something at the end of the line that is sending a demand signal up saying, I need more work, as opposed to something that's monitoring or stage gate and monitoring work and saying, the gate's not full, push more into it.
Okay.
So our premise is more pull-based. And within the waveless model, we work on something called a batch of work, but we often refer to it as a revolving batch of work. And batches are great for efficiency. When I go to a pick location, I love to pick as much of the product as I possibly can and get as much product without traveling to it 10 times a day. In the ideal world, I'd travel to it 1 time a day, get as much as I can, and reduce my walk time and and also my bin face time because I've got everything there.
Yeah.
So we still use the premise of a batch, but we often refer to it as a revolving batch, meaning whenever something leaves the batch, being something going on a shipping sorter, that's the signal, or demand signal in this case, to trigger more work being released back into picking. So in essence, we're always working on a static value. Let's say I've got a batch size of 2,000 orders.
Mm-hmm.
In the conventional world, you'd start at 2,000 and first order completes, second order completes. Eventually, the very last pick that you're doing or the very last case that you're shipping is only a batch size of 1 because you're only picking for the 1 order.
Mm-hmm. With
the revolving batch of work, we're consistently holding 2,000, 1999, 1998. We keep adding more work back in. So when I go to that pick location, I've always got a pick density of 2,000 orders. And that gives us a great deal of efficiency throughout the day of maintaining workflow, but also keeping the largest amount of work in front of everybody every minute of every hour. And because we're doing this kind of, I'm going to call it, again, consistent flow or continuous flow, we're allowed to now take machinery or automation and exercise it at a steady rate for 60 minutes of the hour, as opposed to building a machine for 30 minutes that's going to have a peak rate of 100. I might have a peak rate of 100 or 50, but I'm running that 50 for a full 60 minutes. The conventional approach would be 100, but it's only operating for 15 minutes of the hour or 30 minutes of the hour because it's waiting for more work to arrive. So at the end of the day, we have a couple of things that we really see as huge benefits. One is I'm increasing the efficiency of my workforce because I've always given them the batch of 2,000.
Right.
I've doubled their increase because I've also given them work for 59 minutes of the hour, not 60 minutes of the hour. And third, I've really taken any of the automation equipment and I've made a lesser rate of it and used less of it. So I'm not designing shipping sorters for 100 cartons a minute. I'm designing it for 50. I'm not having 1,000 destinations on an item sorter. I'm having 500. So the capital reduction benefits everybody at the end of the day too. So, it's lean systems can be sometimes difficult to operate because any nuance or any difficulty shows itself right away. But on the plus side, when it's flowing, everybody's got work and everything's working very, very well. There's some intelligence and data that needs to come out of it that we think we're pretty mature in and don't really stumble on our toes implementing our systems.
Okay, interesting. So I'm curious actually because you referred to it as a lean system. So, a lot of times it can be a big cultural change for an organization or a facility. So how do you kind of deal with that, I guess, from your side, from the implementation side? How do you deal with kind of the cultural shift there?
Kevin, this is what we love about you. You've got the experience of the industry, and that question is spot on. So when you're doing some type of culture, any type of change, right? It's you have to put culture forefront in everything that you do. Right. So there's a lot of education, a lot of training that goes through changing someone's mindset from a batch-based system to a waveless or a continuous flow system. And there's also a lot of hand-holding that starts things up. The one thing that we have found is the humans not emotions but behaviors would say that they really want to control levers and switches and try and guide things because they want to be in control at all times. Yeah. So when you talk about the cultural change, to change someone's behavior from tweaking the dials and the knobs and changing the values up and down dissipates almost immediately when you go over to a continuous flow system that is really using, I'm going to call it AI-like algorithms to run the flow. And once we get the culture of an organization to disengage from wanting to touch all the levers and let it go into autopilot, it's different than hitting cruise control of your car or a captain who's doing your flight hitting the autopilot. Once they do that, they can breathe a lot easier and they can kind of focus on things that are much more important. So we really spend a tremendous amount of time on that first education and hand holding folks through it. And then what we're finding is that there's a revelation or a paradigm that supervisors can now start managing labor as opposed to managing workflows. And that's where we start to see some real magic and getting more productivity out of a system because, they don't have the worry and the stress of, well, did I look at my waving the last 15 minutes? What's the progress? Do I need to get my singles out the door? Do I need to increase my overnight deliveries? That is all automated. And now it's like, well, do I have enough folks in the pick module?
Yeah.
Or do I have enough folks in my packing stations? And those are the things that we really want to see to make sure that the operation's really humming along.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point there as well. You have to get people to that point where they see the light, I guess, in a way, to be able to kind of embrace and accept the newness. And like you said, moving away from worrying about the work and worrying just about the labor that can be a huge benefit because, a lot of times you worry about or something gets held up in the system somewhere and you're like, well, why is it held up? And then you're trying to figure that out. And then meanwhile, you got people that are just kind of hanging out, waiting for work to come to them.
Right.
Yeah. So not worrying about that's huge. And that's a big, it's a big change, but it's a good change. It's a good positive change. So it's really good that you guys recognize that cultural impact, I guess, and that you're able to kind of work with that and that you put it as such an importance, like you said, because I think that's a huge thing. And you got to get people on board for things to work the way they should, because, like you said, a lot of people want to control, humans. I don't know what's wrong with us. We just want to control everything, but
we like being controlled everything. That's right. We do.
Yeah. But sometimes when, we put things in place like this and we take a step back, it actually, makes our life easier. So it's really good that you guys recognize that and, that you take the time to get people to see the light, as I said, and kind of embrace it. So it's really, really good. So I'm curious now. So we talked a little bit about Vargo. We talked about COFE and some other things. I'm curious now in this time, since you guys deal with a lot of different operations, you have different clients, and also dealing with different solution types. What kind of trends are you guys seeing in the industry with the pandemic going on and COVID? I know like our industry, distribution, e-commerce is like up versus, a lot of other industries are suffering in a way. But what trends are you seeing from people, and what are your customers kind of looking for in order to keep their business going and help to prepare themselves for the future? I mean, is there more of a shift towards automation?
It's interesting. We're in the middle of this probably pandemic as we're doing this podcast today.
Yeah.
There's two things that are going on. One is the amount of time that folks are now having on their hands because they're working at home and they're focused at their desk and they're not in the field, they're not on the floor, and they're not, doing a lot of the mundane projects that they've got to get done. I think there's a lot more free time, and we've had a tremendous amount of increased conversations on how do I, as an organization, get better? How does a company like Vargo help us? What is a WES? How would it benefit us? And we've had some very detailed conversations on what their future looks like because they're now starting to look at the horizon because they have a pregnant pause in their kind of day-to-day business grind to start investigating and looking at new technology. So that's one thing at COVID I've really enjoyed. Because I think, this is creativity minds are starting to really kind of spark in the middle of this. The bigger, more immediate thing that we see, though, is the need for organizations to absolutely tighten the screws as far as they possibly can on capital. Capital is by far the most precious cargo of any organization that's out there because we don't know what the pandemic holds, and especially with store closings for the retailers where, 75% of their income closes because all those stores are now shuttered and dark and offline, and their employees are still looking to get paid. Their purchases are still coming in from overseas, and yet your outbound customers aren't showing up at your door. So that has created a real crunch for capital. And what we're seeing more in the short term out of COVID is what things can I do to mitigate labor, and what are the flexible pieces of automation that I can bring into my operation that make an impact tomorrow. And while we've always been looking at how do we reduce labor and how do we become more efficient at what we do, the newer technologies like the RAS or Robot as a Service, especially with these AMRs, has really taken off because at the end of the day, I'm not outlaying little to no capital. and the robot is acting like a human, performing the operations and making me more efficient. And how long that will continue, I don't know, but I do know that I may be at 150 before the COVID operation. Now I'm down to 100, and I've got 50 RAS type robots moving around my warehouse that provided benefit, but cost me the exact same, just in a different way. So we see a lot of these mobile, flexible technologies really taking a strong hold over the next 6 to 9 months, and good for the industry in the sense that this is probably the springboard the industry needed to start adapting some of these new technologies, because the reason's now front and center. Longer term, I think the buying behaviors of our clients are driving more e-commerce, more fulfillment, which should result into more e-fulfillment operations, more conveyors, more automation, more storage, more sortation systems, more shipping systems. I think the industry as a general will see a little bit of a surge in the 18-month to 27-month as a result of this, because those that are doing well in e-commerce, and I've been talking to quite a few retailers, and they're saying, going into COVID, they had a good market share. And the customers or the clients that have had great market share going into COVID and were in good cash positions will only get more and more market share coming out of COVID, because their competitors, when they look on the left bench and the right bench, won't be there because they were overstretched or extended beyond their means in debt and leverage. So we think the strong will get stronger, the weak will get weaker, and we're betting on some of the strong folks to kind of carry a new level of automation. And I think the newer, younger folks that are coming into the marketplace will be more adaptive and more familiar with flexible technology such as AMRs.
Definitely, yeah. I think there's some really interesting points there. I think that you had a good point there at the end that the younger people that are coming into the industry are going to be more. Basically at this point, if you look at college graduates, they've been raised with technology, right? So,
Exactly.
They're going to be looking, and they're probably going to be like, well, why are you still doing this by hand? Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? So, and I think even from a different perspective, companies who want to attract that young talent are probably going to be looking at investing in technology to attract young talent, because I think there's going to be younger kids or younger professionals. I don't want to call them kids. I don't want to offend any younger listeners. But they're not going to want to go to a company that doesn't want to invest in technology, because it's going to be boring for them, and it's going to make no sense. They're going to get frustrated, I think. So it's really interesting, and I love the point that you said about this pandemic situation being kind of a springboard for companies almost to that next level of their operation. Like, now is the time that they're getting a chance to look into automation. I think talking to a lot of people and asking them, what do they think, is going on? I think it's, while the pandemic is a terrible thing, people are getting sick. At the same time, it's this time where I think a lot of companies are using it as opportunity, as you said, to explore different options and look at things in a different way. And I think, just like you said, the stronger are going to get stronger and the weaker are going to get weaker. I think the companies that are not looking right now as an opportunity to kind of invest or pivot their business in some way, using more distribution, fulfillment, e-commerce, then they're definitely going to suffer. So really, really interesting insights there, and great conversation around the WS and the differences there, and what COFE does, and obviously what you guys do as well. So Art, how can people find out more information about Vargo?
Oh, great question. So we can always go to our website. Our website's www.vargosolutions.com. Just take a look at our website. You can send an email through the website, or you're more than welcome to always just call our main number at 614-876-1163. We love having conversations because at the end of the day, the more we know about your business, then the more we're able to help you. And it's not an easy task getting to know someone's business overnight. And I think that's one of the challenges we all have is we're all a little different from each other, and the more we know about each other, the better we do.
Definitely. I love that ending point there. So, Art, thank you so much for coming on the show. We'll definitely put all that information about the website, the phone number on thenewwarehouse.com as well for the listeners. So thank you very much.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.